The pages of Ocala Magazine to life. There's only one Ocala Magazine and only one source for local news talk radio. Tune in Friday at 10 a.m. right here on 1370 a.m. and 96.3 FM. WOCA, The Source.
Broadcasting from the Paddock Mall Studios, this is WOCA, Ocala, Gainesville, The Villages, 1370 AM, 96.3 FM, The Source.
All right, 25 minutes before 10 o'clock. It's always interesting to read a book about a guy who owned a radio station.
Yeah.
Right?
It is, yes.
This guy went on to become one of the richest men in America.
He did.
Owning a radio, owned the Detroit Tigers.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep. From Detroit.
It seems like it wasn't money, though. That was his, the carrot at the end of the stick. It was understanding the universe, you know, kind of the sorry.
He was deep.
I had your attention for a little while when I talked about money, right? Yeah. John E. Fetzer is the name of the person I'm talking about. The name of the book about him is John E. Fetzer and the Quest for the New Age. It's written by Brian C. Wilson, and this is oh my gosh, so up my alley. I can't even begin to tell you. In my life, not to talk about me too much, but just to explain why I said that. I mean, I think God wants us to question everything. Don't you think so? I mean, why would he give us such inquisitive minds? Mm-hmm. You know, and I think we're supposed to question things. I think we're even supposed to question his existence and then come to a conclusion about it. You know, I don't know. Maybe John Fetzer, if he were in the room, would have enjoyed the very thought that I would even say that. I don't know. It just seems like it a little bit. So it's another one of those books that kind of helps me with the history that I never learned when I was in school. Brian C. Wilson is on the phone. This is a number one book, by the way, another number one book. Good morning, Brian. How you doing?
Very good. Glad to be here.
Yeah, where are you? Where are you calling from?
Kalamazoo, Michigan.
So Are you that same DNA, speaking, metaphorically speaking? I mean, are you always looking for the answers of the universe also?
Well, yeah, to some degree. I'm a professor of comparative religion.
Oh, you definitely are then. Oh, my gosh. Yeah, of course.
And the fun thing about comparative religion is it's like an infinite search and a bottomless pit. There's always something new to learn.
Yeah. I think the thing that fascinates me about religions is the fact that people embrace them with such certainty. Everybody is so certain that they're right.
Yeah, that's correct. And that's one thing John Fetzer was it's an interesting aspect of his personality with the Fetzer Institute, to kind of continue on his ideas and his spiritual vision long after he died.
So did he come to any conclusions regarding his quest for the New Age? And when we say New Age, can you help us understand what that means? That term is used so much.
It is. And today it's kind of a term of disparagement, but the original idea was that individual spiritual transformation, if enough people were transformed, and this is something that Fetzer believes, then there would be a global spiritual transformation. And that's the idea of the New Age. And of course, this is an idea that goes way back in history. But for John Fetzer, he really picked it up in his readings of Theosophy, which was a new religious movement of the late 19th and early 20th centuries. So the whole idea is that individual spiritual transformation leads to global spiritual transformation. That's the idea of the New Age.
But he went out of his comfort zone when he went to explore that. He went over to the Freemasonry way of thinking, and then to Buddhism, you pointed out. And it's really marvelous that he had such an open mind that he was able to embrace all of the religions and, be so inquisitive about them.
Yeah, one of his key ideas, and it's still one of the key ideas of the Fetzer Institute, is the idea of freedom of the spirit, that everybody has their personal path to follow, and each person's personal path needs to be respected. Now, John Fetzer ultimately believed that the universe was one and everything was spirit. So no matter what path he followed, it would all lead back to the source of all. So this idea of freedom of the spirit, of constant exploration, and the idea that you should respect other people's spiritual paths was a real key idea for him.
I don't know if talk radio was popular when he owned a radio station, and when I said talk radio, I mean the small talk stations, like the one you're talking to. One of the best things I get out of doing this show is the ideas from our listeners, and they are so varied, and the ideas from our guests as well, of course. And so as the person speaking to everybody, Robin and I, the two people that speak to everybody, it's very, I don't know what word to use here, but it expands so much about how you think about things. You understand that you don't understand. Maybe that's what I want to say. You understand that you don't understand. Did he use his early years in the radio business as a way to kind of express his thoughts or get input about other people's thoughts, or was it like a music station?
Well, I think it was primarily music. They did have like entertainment, and there was the heyday of radio serial and things like that. I'm not too sure that they had too many kinds of talk programs like we're doing today. Mm-hmm. The thing with Fetzer, though, is he was very careful in his early years to kind of keep his personal search private. And part of that was that he was building his kind of media empire in Southwest Michigan, the Midwest, in a very religiously conservative area. And he was concerned that if people knew that he was out there looking at all these things, theosophy, Hermeticism, Rosicrucianism, Freemasonry, that he would lose audience members or sponsors.
Yeah.
So for most of his life, until probably the 60s and 70s, when he was in later life, he was very quiet about them. And even his closest colleagues at the radio station, they knew he had these interests, but they didn't know how deep they actually went.
Well, you pointed out that he is also a patriot, that he helped during World War II and then the post-administrations after that.
Yes, he was appointed an assistant radio censor by FDR during World War II, and found that experience really very interesting. And then just at the end of World War II, he was tapped by Dwight Eisenhower to go with a group of radio owners, radio station owners, and journalists to go to Europe and kind of assess the state of radio. And that was just an eye-opening experience for John Fetzer. And then later in the 1950s, he was also involved in the Voice of America, doing promotional tours for them.
Wow, he's an amazing guy. How did you come to know him, and why don't I know him? Did I just miss something?
No, I think he's very well known, of course, here in Kalamazoo, because this is where the Fetzer Institute is based.
Ah, okay.
And most people in Michigan associate him with Detroit Tigers, because he was owner of the team for 30 years. But his spiritual search and the programs of the Fetzer Institute are kind of, a best-kept secret. Beyond the region, he's not very well known. Hopefully, after this book, more people will know about him.
Yeah, I think so. I've often wondered this, and I don't know if this plays to the book or not, but I've often wondered if we could live long enough and we could actually study all the religions of the world, and then at the end of our lives, sit down and say, "Oh my gosh, I think I had all the answers I needed when I was 6 or 5 or 4." What do you think? I mean, because it sounds like you're kind of on the same path. Is that what attracted you to him? Was his search for those kinds of things?
Oh, very definitely, very definitely. And I like the idea that he always kept an open mind, because even when he was in his 70s and 80s, he was still out there reading and exploring and taking on new religious and spiritual practices. I think he came to a conclusion about what the universe was all about. But I'm not sure that everybody who basically does this path will. And that, I think, again, it's a cliche, but I think it's really the journey, not necessarily the destination.
Yeah, well, that's a wonderful thing to say, because that's about all we really have is the journey, isn't it?
That's right.
It is fascinating, though. When you think about somebody, I mean, it's the quest of humanity is to figure out why we're here, how we're here, what's the whole point of it all. Right. And then, as you say, well, maybe it's just about doing it. It's kind of like it's a Winnie the Poohism, isn't it? I just saw that movie this weekend.
I
mean,
yeah.
Winnie the Pooh had all those kind of profound little things. I am walking because I'm not sitting, or something like that. Those kind of things. Yeah.
Well, for Fetzer, I think the real thing that motivated him, and it's an interesting thing about him. I mean, he was extremely wealthy. He was one of the Forbes' 400 wealthiest Americans. But he lived a very modest life because he really felt he wanted to ultimately put his money into a spiritual quest. But that wasn't just simply for his own benefit. He really had a kind of social vision. This idea of global transformation, spiritual transformation, was always foremost.
That was it, huh?
Mm-hmm.
So if I was sitting at a dinner with him, and let's say all I know about him is the Detroit Tigers, and I'm thinking, well, let me strike up a conversation with Mr. Fetzer. He's probably want to talk about sports. Would he glaze over until I started talking about philosophy? Would that really be the real heart of what he wanted to talk about?
Well, I think so. He was awfully proud of the ball team, though. So I'm sure he would be more than willing to talk baseball with you. He was also, of course, just a brilliant businessman, so he loved talking about his businesses. But I think he really would have piqued his interest if you had started, talking about his spiritual and philosophical interests.
Did the philosophical interest or the philosophies themselves play a role in his success? Like, did he feel like he ran his businesses based on his philosophies, and that was a key, or did he not make a connection?
Well, he was careful to kind of keep his personal life out of his businesses, but he believed that his business success really came from his intuition, and he really believed that was a kind of special form of ESP. I mean, he was absolutely fascinated by paranormal phenomena and parapsychology. So in that sense, he really felt that his business success was based on some kind of psychic connection. But only on rare occasions did he actually inject his spiritual ideas into his businesses. Probably the most famous was, I think it was 1974. Fetzer had gotten very interested in transcendental meditation, and he'd gotten to be good friends with a Maharishi yogi. So he offered classes in transcendental meditation to the Detroit Tigers team during spring training. And some of them picked it up, and they really enjoyed it. But he never pushed it. It was never, required or anything like that. And that's a good example of how he would kind of apply some of his spiritual ideas to businesses.
Well, I'll bet my stepdad knew him then. I mean, Alice passed since, Alice passed. That's my stepdad's name. But he was the bodyguard for the bird while he was on the team. Yeah. So he, we have video of him walking, him out there and everything. So he must have known him.
Oh, well, there's a great story about Mark Fidrich, the bird. He had that really very interesting pitching style where he talked to the baseball and have a distinct kind of ritual on the mound. And he, at a certain point, I guess, got very self-conscious about what he was doing on the mound because sports writers were making fun of him. So Fetzer actually had him up to his office one day, and Fetzer always carried a pendulum with him to make decisions. And the idea was that he would, if he had a decision to make and he wasn't quite sure what decision, what to do, he would take this pendulum and address a series of yes/no questions to him.
Oh, wow.
Depending on which way it deflected, it would influence his decision. But what he did with Fidrich was he sat him down and they both stared at the pendulum and used their minds to move the pendulum. So Fetzer really believed in this idea of mind over matter, that you can use your mind to influence material events. And so the lesson to Fidrich was that all his antics on the mound and talking to the baseball was actually having an impact. It was mind over matter and was kind of the basis for his success as a pitcher.
Oh, wow. Wow.
That's fascinating.
In his memoirs, basically said he really appreciated that talk with John Fetzer.
So did he, with all the money, was he a philanthropist toward organizations that were pursuing these same kinds of things?
Yes, the Fetzer Foundation, which he set it up in the 1950s, but he really started funding it up in the 1970s, was really designed to give grants to various research outfits or social organizations, and has continued to do that to this day. It's still a large foundation that gives out a number of grants every year. The emphasis has changed over the years because in the 1970s, John Fetzer was really interested in parapsychology, so he was funding up parapsychological research. And then later in life, he got very interested in alternative medicine. And so from the 80s to the 90s, the Fetzer Institute basically funded research into alternative medicine and energy medicine and these kinds of things. And today, it's really focused on promoting spirituality in a variety of different settings. So they have a number of programs, for example, to talk about or encourage spirituality among seniors, for example. And another program is all about the connection between democracy and spirituality, and in hopes that discussions of spirituality among people will hopefully bridge divides and get people talking to each other instead of shouting at each other.
Do you feel that you and John Fetzer are kindred spirits?
To some degree, yeah. Unfortunately, I don't have his business acumen, but we certainly share his the interest in the kind of multiplicity of all sorts of metaphysical and new religious movements out there.
I was curious about something. I hope this isn't out of left field kind of a question, but was he involved in the Rife frequency machine? Did that ever come up, or do you know what I'm talking about?
Like the Rife microscope?
Well, it was supposedly a machine that radiated a frequency that could cure cancer and other diseases.
Yes. In fact, some of the early funding when he shifted to alternative medicine was for all sorts of energy medicine devices. So, for example, he was interested in something called radionics, which was this idea that all our organ systems in the body basically radiate certain frequencies. And by comparing frequencies between a healthy and an unhealthy person, you could actually not only diagnose disease, but also cure disease. So, the Rife frequency machine, the Rife microscope, those were things he funded. He was also interested in something called the Lakhovsky wave generator, which essentially was a couple of Tesla coils that created this high voltage field that supposedly if you put affected parts of the body in it, it would actually cure them.
Wow, it sounds very similar to the Rife frequency.
Yeah.
You know what I would love to ask him, and I'm just going to put this out there, and if it goes someplace, then it does. If not, then it doesn't. But I would love to ask him his thoughts on the Shroud of Turin, the cloth that Christ supposedly was buried under, because it looks to me that it was created by light. And then Jesus always referred to himself as the light. And can you comment on that? Did he go in that direction at all? Did he study?
Oh, I think I think he would have been fascinated by it. I didn't find any specific mentions of it, but the reason he got into exploring metaphysical traditions was through his radio engineering. He was a real fan of Nikola Tesla, and Fetzer thought that electromagnetic radiation must be just a small part of the spectrum that ranges out into subtle energy.
Yeah.
And so I think if there were a subtle energy kind of explanation for the Shroud of Turin, I think John Fetzer would have accepted it.
Yeah. You know what I wonder sometimes? We're just having a conversation here. I want to be fair to the book, but you are fascinating yourself, Brian. I often wonder if the frequency, the wavelengths that we always are aware of, are why we see life here and nowhere else. And this is going to sound crazy, but maybe there is life on every planet. Maybe that's just a frequency that we're not in tune to.
Well, yeah, John Fetzer actually believed that when you die, you just simply ascend to a higher frequency. And so that makes you invisible. So,
to us.
I mean, that would be a good explanation if that were true of, why we don't see life on other planets, perhaps.
Did your research into John Fetzer also spill over into researching Dr. Kellogg?
Well, a little bit, because they share the interesting fact that they were both four-time Seventh-day Adventists. Dr. Kellogg, of course, was born and raised in the Seventh-day Adventist tradition, which is an apocalyptic tradition that actually began as an official denomination in Battle Creek, Michigan. And then eventually Dr. Kellogg was excommunicated for a variety of reasons from Seventh-day Adventism. And then he went on to basically construct his own kind of religious worldview, which he called biologic living. And so in some ways, Fetzer is the same, because Fetzer was a Seventh-day Adventist during his 20s. And then he left the tradition because he found it too constraining. And that launched him off into this quest for a new worldview through all these different metaphysical traditions that he investigated. So they share that common bond of being in the Seventh-day Adventist Church.
Robin is from Wisconsin. Robin, let's visit Wisconsin. Let's visit Michigan next time we visit Wisconsin.
Okay.
I never have been to Michigan. It's one of those things. I guess I have to start traveling a little bit more. Your book is doing really well. I'm looking on Amazon, and it's #1 in Theosophy. Is that how you say it?
That's correct.
It's also as a Kindle. It's doing really well. So I have a copy of the book. If I have a listener who wants the copy, call me right now, and it's yours. The rest of us have to go buy it. Like I say, it's on Amazon. Do you have any other websites you want to recommend?
Yes, if you're interested in more information about the Fetzer Institute, you can go to fetzer.org. And if you go to infinitepotential.com, you can download a free PDF of the preface and first chapter of the book.
What your book really does, sir, it so inspires on every different level, because you're allowing science and spirituality to live in harmony, but you're also encouraging people to keep their home life separate from their work life. And I think that is the most important message too.
I think that's tremendously important.
But if he was my boss, I would go there with him. I would want to talk to him. Oh my gosh. Yeah, I think I'd make him uncomfortable trying to bring his personal beliefs into the workplace. He'd say, "Get back to work. Get back to that pitching mound and throw those balls." Brian, what an amazing, like you said at some point in this interview, those who don't know John Fetzer will know him now that you've written this book about him. Has the family embraced the book?
Yes. His great nephew, Bruce Fetzer, is actually head of the Memorial Trust, which is a branch of the Fetzer Institute. And he's the one who actually commissioned me originally to write the book, and he's just thrilled by it.
Oh, wow. I bet they all are. Yeah. Well, we get to know another great American, and thank you for doing that, Brian. And good luck with everything. Come back with the next one. I can't wait to hear from you again.
I definitely will. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We'll be right back.
Gene Powell Pasture Mowing, 352-629-2440. Our tractor services include bush hog, disking, front end loader, box blade, and stump grinding. We also have zero-turn mowers for the smaller paddocks, aisleways, fence rows, and lawn care. Fence row spraying is also available for weed control. We are licensed and insured. Gene Powell Pasture Mowing, 352-629-2440, or online at powellgene, GENE, @yahoo.com.